Hi guys, and welcome to this part 1 of the Seiko 7019A movement strip. You can see the watch here, and the circled area there shows an etched Seiko 5 logo on the crystal. This particular watch should house a 7S26 movement, but in fact contains a 7019A movement, which is an older Seiko movement, and indicates that this watch is something of a Franken watch. I purchased this from a flea market in Hamburg in Germany, and I kept the 7019A movement in this because it kept the watch original to the watch as purchased by me as a memento of my holiday there. Here I'm going to go ahead and remove the oscillating weight before I remove the movement from the case. And you can see there that there's some corrosion on the threads, and there is in fact a little bit of corrosion on the ratchet wheel that you can possibly see as well. Here you see the pole that operates the winding mechanism of the Seiko, and no matter which way it rotates it winds the ratchet wheel, which you can see circled here with the click spring, in just the one direction only. So it's bi-directional automatic winding movement. At this point I'm removing the plastic retaining ring. Which then allows you to go ahead and remove the stem. On the 7019A movement the stem is drawn out fully, and this gives you access to the release plate that you can see just on the screen and allows you to draw the stem out. Just here I'm checking to see that the movement is free to move in the case and to make sure that there's nothing else holding it in before I upturn that onto the casing cushion and allow the movement to drop out of the case. The next step is removal of the hands from the dial. Here I'm just using a sheet of plastic with a slot cut in there. This is a homemade cheap alternative to the version dial protecting sheets that you can buy. A polybag will also do the same job, and this is just to protect the dial from scratches from your hand levers or your hand removal tool. In this case I'm using a Presto hand removal tool for the simple reason that it gives better visibility than the hand levers. Just for this video, this was the first time I'd actually filmed or attempted to film a video of a movement strip and service. This particular video was shot on my cell phone, which is a Samsung Galaxy Note 4, and the rebuild video was shot with my usual camera. Here's the back of the movement. You can see with the balance wheel ticking away there, and what I'm pointing out there are the dial feet retaining screws, which are eccentric screws. These are turned just far enough so that they loosen off. They will only turn one way. If turn them the wrong way, they won't move because they'll be trying to cut into the dial feet. The dial was actually fixed quite firmly onto this movement and needed quite a bit of persuasion with the tip of a screwdriver to get one of the dial feet to move. At some point there has been a little bit of moisture ingress. I don't think it's had water inside it so much as condensation, perhaps because the rubber gasket was missing on the case back. This particular part of the video does show you the lovely dial of the watch, and this is one of the things that attracted me to it. Initially I wanted a German watch, being in Germany, but all the German watches that were on offer for sale were quite poor quality and ridiculously overpriced, to be frank, and I saw the dial on this one and really liked it. Here we see the dial and the ring, the plastic ring which sits underneath it, which acts as a spacer separated from the movement. and this gives us access to the day and date wheels. I'm removing the circlip that holds the day wheel in place, carefully using the flat blade of a screwdriver with my finger over the clip just in case it does decide to ping away. Once the circlip is removed, this allows the day wheel to be wiggled free of its jumper spring and lifted up. Here on the underside you can see the star mechanism that acts against the jumper spring, which you can see between my fingers at the top there, and I just show that in just a moment, as you can see there. This section I was pointing the tweezers at just then is the date change, and that was the rapid date change, which is on a separate mechanism, but as you can see now, as I wind that in the hand setting position, that will move around and in the space of 24 hours will move the date along one space. Here I'm removing the jumper spring for the day wheel, which is held down by two screws which also form part of the four screws that hold the plate underneath it. During the filming of this, it became very apparent how tricky it is to work on a watch movement whilst trying to film up close with a camera, because you are acutely aware all the time of trying not to obscure the camera, trying not to knock the camera, and trying to keep checking and making sure that everything is in the frame and in focus. And as a result of that, it probably took about 3 times longer than it ordinarily would for me to strip a movement and to rebuild it than if I was just doing it without the camera being there. And this gives me an even greater level of respect for YouTubers such as watchmakers such as Mark Lovick on the Watch Repair channel, who I really enjoy watching. Especially seeing the detail that he can go to, and his manipulation skills whilst working under a camera. It's quite remarkable. There I just removed the date advance wheels, and here I'm just removing the final 2 screws for the plate that covers the keyless works and retains the date ring. On the back of that you can see a plastic cog. It's the only plastic cog in this movement, and it's one of the few things I'm not overly keen about that you get with Seiko, is their use of plastic cogs and advance wheels and such. But you do only see them on the keyless works side. But you can see there that because of a build-up of old oils, grease or what have you, the plastic wheel had stuck to the plate, and I just replaced it where it should go so that you can see where that should have been had the plate lifted off cleanly. Just there We'll remove the date ring, and you can see the teeth on the bottom, and I don't know if you noticed when that jumped out, but you could see the date jumper spring, which is up at the top of the screen currently, just pop up there. This large spring that I'm pointing to currently is the day wheel advance return spring, which is operated when you push the crown in, unlike the 7S26 where it is operated in the date setting position by turning the crown one way as opposed to the other. There we've removed the hour wheel and then the intermediate plastic wheel and the date setting wheel. I now need to remove the rapid day advance mechanism before I can take the minute wheel off. You need to be careful when you go ahead and do this because there is a small thin spring underneath there. We can now remove the minute wheel. I think I said day wheel previously, my apologies for that, but there's the minute wheel. And then the cannon pinion. You can buy special cannon pinion removal tools. I don't have one, I just tend to use tweezers, and usually with a firm grip and a straight upward pull it will remove a cannon pinion without problem. Now turning the movement over, I'm going to start disassembling the motion works. The reduction wheel here you see has a left-handed screw denoted by the 3 lines on the screw head. And here I'm just trying to manipulate the fingers into the best position to allow me to wiggle this wheel free. Once this wheel is removed, I'm going to move the arms of the winding mechanism out of the way because it sits over the ratchet wheel, so that when I come to remove the ratchet wheel it doesn't bend or break the winding pawl arms. And here I'm just releasing the spring tension. As you can see, you can see quite clearly at this point the little bits of corrosion on the ratchet wheel as well. These will be cleaned up later. Next I remove the balance cock with the balance complete. And what I like to do when removing a balance cock is gently separate the balance cock itself from the plate, from its locating pin and its screw hole, and before I lift it completely away, I prefer to free the balance wheel pivot by gently working the balance wheel with a pair of tweezers and then trying to lift the whole assembly away like so, because sometimes they have a tendency to stick in there, and if you just lift the balance cock away, it can the spring can stretch quite a bit, the hairspring, which I don't particularly like to do. Here I'm unscrewing the ratchet wheel screw, which has a built-in wide flat washer, and here again it's very evident how much corrosion there is on the ratchet wheel. As you can see, it was stuck on there quite well. With evidence of corrosion on the underside as well. At this point I unscrew the screws for the pallet fork, and obviously it's important to have made sure that you've released all of the power from the mainspring before you go ahead and do this. And you'll note at this point I got distracted by double checking the camera, because I think the battery was going flat and I had to sort of recheck and recharge and fiddle things around, and completely forgotten that I'd loosened the pallet fork bridge screws, and where I would normally have removed those, the bridge and the pallet fork, before I go ahead and remove the main train and balance bridge screws. But I do notice that in a moment and go ahead and remove those. As I remove the pallet fork bridge, the pallet fork comes away with the bridge, sticking into the pivot hole, which suggests that at some point this has either been oiled or some oil has migrated to it. And as you're probably aware, the pallet fork bridge pivots should not be oiled. And there I'm just separating the two so that I can show you them on the screen there. And then we go ahead and continue removing the main plate, which covers the train and barrel. At this point I'm removing the small clip which holds the winding mechanism wheel in place, and similarly to the day wheel I'm covering that just in case it pings away, but in this case using a piece of Rodico. You can then lift the plate away, which leaves the winding wheel and the pawl levers exposed, and you can separate those. Next we remove the combined click and click spring. And then the train wheels, the third and fourth wheels, and then the mainspring barrel. And the final piece on this side of the plate is the second wheel, which is held in place by another plate. Or bridge or cock, as you might refer to it in this case. Just cutting away for a moment, here you can see the mainspring barrel, which I'm opening and removing the mainspring from. These are quite awkward to open and weren't really intended to be serviceable, I don't think, compared to your typical mainspring barrel, which would just have a flat disc which clips inside the barrel. The mainspring barrel lid rather, which clips inside the barrel. These have an overlapping lid and they can be quite a fiddle to work loose. There you see the barrel arbor, which I've removed, and here I'm just teasing out the first few coils of the mainspring before using both hands and my thumbs to control the mainspring as it is unwound out of the barrel. You'll see once this is fully unwound that this mainspring is not in particularly good shape and has some bad kinks in it towards the saddle end. And I did in fact end up replacing this mainspring with a mainspring from another used movement which was in much better condition. But I did actually use this particular spring in the automatic in the mainspring 3D printed mainspring winder video, which you may have seen, but you can see the really bad kinks in this particular spring. We now go back to the bottom of the movement and remove the jumper here for the date wheel. This is the jumper spring. Next is the Rapid Day Advance spring. Incidentally, I may not be referring to these parts by their official Seiko manual name, as I don't have an official Seiko repair manual or parts manual handy whilst I'm narrating this. I'm just kind of going on naming as I've learnt them over the years as I've been working on watch movements. So if there is anything erroneous there that you feel the need to make mention of, please pop a comment below and let me know. This particular spring is under quite a lot of tension, so you have to wiggle that out carefully. Although on the positive side, it's a very large part compared to most of them, so if it does ping away, you should find it quite easily. One of the beauties of Seiko movements is they have very few tiny little springs and such, and as a result it makes the stripping and refitting a little bit more pleasant and less awkward, because some of the tiny little click springs and wire springs can be incredibly fiddly. Here I'm removing the parts that make up the keyless works, and if you've worked on pretty much any Seiko self-winding automatic, this will look very familiar, because this is a setup that's been changed very little over the years. There's the setting lever spring. The only part remaining to remove, or the only two parts to be precise, are the winding stem and the clutch wheel, or in this case the hand setting stem, as you cannot actually manually hand wind the Seiko 5 movements. And then we have a plate which is held by one screw, which contains two cap jewels for the train. On the other side of the barrel and train bridge, there are two separate cap jewels held by small diafix springs, and those two jewels and the two for the balance pivots are the only remaining parts to be removed. These I do just prior to cleaning, so that they are not rattling around loose for longer than is absolutely necessary. So that concludes the strip portion of the 7019A movement. Thank you for watching, and I shall be editing the cleaning procedure and rebuild shortly and uploading that.